We're going to go through a total body warm-up. So the idea of this is no matter what the session that you're about to do, we're going to hit all the major muscle groups, all the major joint complexes. So if you've got sort of 10 or 15 minutes to really prepare the body, we're going to take you through a very specific total body warm-up. 4 stages of strategy. We're going to look at soft tissue, mobility, and flexibility. We'll look at stability, and then we'll look at some movement integration. So essentially, we're going to look at sort of the hip, hamstrings, and then our movement integration is going to be a push-up and a squat matrix. So Tom's going to go through it, and we'll talk and chat as we go through. So we're going to start off with our soft tissue combined with some functional flexibility, so for the glutes. In terms of utilising the vibration, we know increasing blood flow, increasing circulation, essentially activating the body, preparing it optimally for the workout to come. In terms of personalising the settings, then we're going to work in this one for 45 seconds, but personal preference, so a self-selected setting in terms of the frequency, and we would suggest using a low amplitude. So we'll get the plate going, and simply all Tom's going to do is going to drive the movement forward and back. This is kind of a traditional 90-90 glute stretch, but we're simply going to sort of drive the shoulders, the head, whatever feels the most comfortable, but also you'll see that we're getting some movement through the pelvis as well, but we're just mobilising the tissues, in this case in the sagittal plane. So 10 or 15 seconds, then we're going to hold, and now we're going to move from side to side. So we're kind of combining the fact that the right side glute is in contact with the vibration. We're actually getting some soft tissue, direct soft tissue work, but at the same time also getting this mobility and flexibility response. And then our final one is going to be a little bit of rotation, so kind of driven by the shoulders. You'll see that is essentially creating that reaction through the pelvis of rotation, which is mobilising the glute essentially in all 3 planes of motion. Great job. Perfect. So obviously we're doing one side, and then he would then repeat exactly the same process on the other side. What we're going to do, we're going to come standing. And we're going to go right into a sort of a 3-step process for the hips. So we're going to go front hip, medial hip, and then into sort of the posterior lateral hip. So our first exercise is going to be what looks like a traditional sort of hip flexor stretch. So extension through the hip, stance is nice and wide, whatever feels comfortable. Again, we're going to go 45 seconds, we're going to do 15 seconds per plane. You see how Tom's got hands on the pelvis, just going to drive the pelvis forward and back. So nice and controlled, nice rhythmical motion, maximising the vibration and the tension created in the anterior part of the body, so the hip flexors, the quads, but also because we're driving the whole body, we're getting a chain reaction from the feet all the way up. After 15 seconds, we're going to hold, go from side to side, so now we're just shifting the pelvis across in the frontal plane. A couple more seconds in that one, Tom. And then the final one, imagine we've got a steering wheel for the pelvis, and we're just going to rotate one way and then the other way. Again, if at any time you feel that you need to reset the balance, that's fine. Nice and controlled, nice and rhythmical movement, and to a self-selected range. And then relax from there. Perfect. So we've done the anterior hip, we're going to stay on the same side, so to the right hip. Now we're going to go medial hip. So setup is, as Tom's demonstrating here, almost like a traditional adductor stretch. So we're going to drop into the stretch so you feel that sort of extensibility in that right adductor. And the process is exactly the same. So we've got a slight stretch felt, and we're just driving the pelvis forward and back. So sagittal plane to start with. Again, self-selected, rhythmical and controlled. The range of motion should feel comfortable. Then we're going to hold that position. We're just going to kind of just translate and shift the pelvis across in the frontal plane. Because the foot's elevated, it won't give you a lot of range of motion. You kind of feel that you've used a lot of that just because the foot is elevated already. And the final one, often the area that we don't explore, is the transverse plane. So we hold, and we're just going to rotate pelvis a little like a steering wheel. And particularly as you rotate away from the body, that's when we really open up this sort of medial hip capsule into the adductors and all the medial hip complex. Excellent. Feel okay? So we've got an anterior hip, we've got medial hip, and now we're going to change. The final one is going to be, again, posterior lateral hip, but almost like a hamstring stretch. So we'll set up as a traditional hamstring stretch. We'll go right leg yet. A slightly knee bend. And this is really important because traditionally we often see people locking the knee out and kind of doing the hamstring stretch with a locked knee. What we know about the hamstrings is particularly when the foot hits the floor, then they're working with a knee bent a lot of the time. So to kind of replicate an authentic response, we're going to make sure that we maintain that slight knee bend through the hamstring. Nice wide base support, and we're simply just going to drive the pelvis forward and back. Or if it helps to imagine, kind of just bringing your nose almost towards where my hand is on here, if that makes sense. 45 seconds again. So we kind of feel that length through the hamstring. Perfect. Excellent. So we're looking from motion through the pelvis. And you should feel, Tom, as you're coming in, you kind of feel that length, and then kind of take the tension away. So we're going in, loading into the movement, and coming back out. If we wanted to bias it a little bit, we can kind of internally rotate the foot a touch. You'll feel a slightly different reaction through the hamstrings. So back to the normal position, hold, so you feel a stretch, shift the hips from side to side. So we've got that frontal plane translation of the pelvis, will feel very different. And then finally the rotation again in the transverse plane. So particularly with the hamstrings, they like the transverse plane, they like that rotation. So this is a really comprehensive way of mobilising the hamstrings in all three planes of motion, taking advantage of the vibration stimulus. Great job. So moving into the next section is going to be our mobility. So I guess more of a global movement now. So we're going to do two. We're going to do same side or a rotational lunge with a reach. So Tom's going to set up kind of almost side onto the plate, and that's going to give a lot of surface area so that when we step onto the plate we can rotate. So before we start the vibration, Tom, let's just sort of go through a couple of the movements, because the transverse plane and kind of this rotation is an area that you might not always explore. So really take your time in terms of feeling the movement, self-select your range of motion, and then the hands driving in that same side rotation just creates more mass and momentum. So just make sure you feel comfortable and control. So we'll set the plate, can be 30 or 45 seconds. And then we'll just work through just a couple of reps to reinforce that movement. So you'll notice Tom's doing a great job of keeping the foot pretty still, so we're not allowing the foot to spin out. And hopefully as he comes around and rotates, you kind of feel that left hip opening up. So we're going to that kind of external rotation of the hip, but at the same time we're also mobilising the thoracic spine, the hip, and obviously the foot and ankle complex as well. Okay, so 30 to 45 seconds, and then obviously we'll swap round and repeat that on the same leg. So what we're going to do now is, because we've worked on the external rotation of the left hip, we're now going to stand on the plate and we're going to look at closing the hip in terms of internal rotation. And just for ease of following, we're going to still focus on the left hip. So Tom's going to start off with what we call sort of a T-step or an opposite side rotational lunge. And you'll see now that you should feel more of that kind of the hip being closed, so internal rotation. And then we're going to allow the arms to create a little bit more dynamic nature. So the arms are rotating in the same direction as the foot. This is our sort of opposite side rotational lunge, and you should feel a difference, Tom, in kind of how that reaction to the left here. So we've kind of opened it out, and we're going to close it. So we'll put the plate on. We'll go through a few repetitions to reinforce it. And again, as Tom's done a great job already, a slight knee bend before we start, just to minimise that vibration travel to the head. So take your time, learn the movement, add the arm swings, and as you go, if you feel you want to add a little bit more either speed or range of motion, you can do. This is a really good way of maximising sort of that internal and external rotation of the hip in all three planes of motion. And then just relax. And obviously, we would then repeat on the other side. So we've worked on our dynamic mobility, and it's important now that we've gifted the body more range of motion that we also focus on controlling that range of motion with stability, and enhanced a lot by the vibration, which is obviously challenging the body to stabilise dynamically. So we're going to have two positions here. The first one is going to be a single leg balance, so again slight knee bend. Then you have two options. The first one is going to be a tap, so we're just opening up and we're just tapping and returning. Now obviously without the vibration, it's a slightly different challenge, and then if you feel comfortable, then you take away that tap and it goes into more of a reach. Okay, so I'll pop a plate on top, just so you can kind of feel the difference that the vibration makes in terms of challenging the body. So we start with a slight knee bend, so we're sort of toe to position, and then we're tapping. Excellent. And if you feel comfortable and successful with the tap, then we take that away and that becomes a reach. And that's when you can kind of explore maybe more range of motion. But you definitely feel that kind of stability challenge for the body. And we're obviously focusing here on this left hip. Can it control that mobility that we created with our lunge earlier. Excellent. And then relax. So that creates that stability in the transverse plane for external rotation. And now we're going to close the hip, and we're going to do the same strategy, but we're going to work on the opposite direction. So we'll obviously repeat the other one on the other side. So it's going to be a single leg balance, that's perfect. So we're going to start with a tap. And if you feel successful with the tap, we're going to take that away, and then it becomes a reach. So now we're saying to the posterior lateral hip, can you decelerate, can you slow down and control the mobility we've already provided? So, set the plate, 30 seconds, slight knee bend. Once you feel balanced, we have a tap. And if you feel comfortable, you stay with the tap. If you want to challenge yourself a little more, then take away, and now we go into the reach. And again, because we're adding the vibration as that challenge, the whole body is kind of reflexively responding. Excellent, great job. So that will be 30 seconds of work, and then obviously we'll repeat that on the same side with the other leg. So our last section of our movement preparation strategy is going to be movement integration. We're going to take two movements, push-up and also the squat. So we'll start with the push-up. So we're in this prone position, sort of an athletic base, and we're going to work through sort of an initial range of motion because we are warming up, we are preparing. So you have to kind of self-select the range that you go through, but we're suggesting sort of an initial range. And what we're going to do, Tom's going to do 2 repetitions, but we're simply going to change the hand positions. We're going to go with the right hand forward, then the left. We're going to go wider than neutral in the frontal plane, a little bit narrower. And we're going to come back to our initial position, turn the hands in, and then turn the hands out. This is going to what it's going to look like. So 45 or 60 seconds. Controlled athletic ready position. And you'll see Tom's kind of self-selecting the range. 2 repetitions, and we make a change with the hand position. And by changing the hands, that kind of challenges the body in a different way. It also changes how the vibration transfers into the soft tissue and the connective tissue system. And now we're coming narrow. Tom's chosen that narrow one because he's a strong guy. Wide, internal rotation of the hands. And then the last one is going to be external rotation. And then relax. And obviously, given the fact that you're setting this time for maybe 45 or 60 seconds, you just keep repeating that sequence through if you manage to get another round in. So our final exercise or movement in this series is going to be a squat. So we're going to take exactly the same strategy as we did for the push-ups, where we're going to change the foot position. And obviously, we'll set up the Tom on the plate. So we're simply going to change the foot position forward. We're going to go wide and narrow. We're going to go internal and external rotation. And what you'll also notice Tom's going to do, and we'll just kind of run through this actually, is we're going to go through 3 repetitions, but they're going to kind of go a little bit deeper each time. So we're going to go initial range, and what we call mid-range, and then your self-selected end range, so whatever feels comfortable for you. And what's really important to remember is that when you change the foot position, that sensation of an initial, mid, and end range will change. Particularly when we come into sort of this internal position here, then the idea is not to try and get to the same range each time, it's to listen to the body and essentially allow the body to self-select those ranges. Okay, so we'll start in our kind of traditional sort of squat neutral position, a slight knee bend so we manage that vibration travel. We're going to go for 60 seconds, whatever setting feels comfortable. So we're athletic ready position to start, and we'll take it nice and slow. So initial, mid, and then end range. And then we'll make a change to the foot position. So now, because the left foot's gone forward, a bit more dorsiflexion on this right ankle. Excellent, and we'll change again. There's nice control, nice and rhythmical, self-selectable ranges. And now we're going to go to the frontal plane. We'll go wide in the frontal plane, initial, mid, and end. And of course, if we've gone wide, now we're going to come narrow, so it doesn't have to be completely together. It's inside shoulder width. And now when we turn back to neutral, we're going to turn the toes in. This is the one to be careful and cautious of. So Tom, you'll feel that different sort of reaction through the hips a lot. So you can kind of really self-select that range, and then we're going to go externally rotated, and we're going to work through that same process. Now we'll actually just return back to neutral, and we'll just finish that off with the same thing. So initial, mid, and end range. Great job. And then relax. So that completes the sequence, and just to reiterate, the foot position change is really important that you manage that kind of self-selected range. So particularly when we come in this position, just listen to your body and allow your body to tell you how comfortable you feel.